everybody, Sven Diesel here. We're going to be tying up the Carey Special. I'm going to fancy it up a little bit, but this is a pattern from the early 1900s. It's a staple for Stillwater, named after its creator. I think it's from like the 20s or 30s, coming out of Canada, but we're going to tie this in a size 6. I typically have these in 4 6s and 8s, and we're going to be using a black nano silk in a 6/0. Just because it allows me a little bit more creativity and shaping when finishing off the fly at the head. I normally tie these in browns and with traditional peacock colors, but I'm going to make this a little fancier today. Just adding a few extra steps and adding a little bit more flashiness to the body than I typically do, and having a little bit of fun with it. So for the tail and for the collar of this fly, we're going to be using some pheasant rump. This is from Nature Spirit, and you can see this is a herring gray, and it's got this really good shimmer to it. I'm going to select 2 feathers right here down kind of off the side, and this is going to be our tail. I want to have a little bit of that speckling, that barring, and a little bit of that translucent bluish green. Looks really, really awesome. And so what we're going to do here is I'm going to prep this feather by getting rid of all the fluff, and then I'm going to pull these fibers back, and I want to basically trim out the very tip, the stem, where the feathers start to transition from being all the same length to being a little bit smaller in fiber length, and that way we have a more uniform tail. And so I'll just go ahead and prep those, and then I will advance these onto the shank here, and I'm going to kind of make sure it's aligned properly, and I'm going to lay it kind of flat, and then we'll do 2 to 3 loose wraps here, just to kind of tie it in, see where it's looking, making sure it's on the top. That's a little long, so I'm going to pull it, and that's looking a little bit better. Usually I don't pull it back out. If you do that, make sure you grab all the fibers, and then I'll go ahead and tie this stem all the way up. I'm not adding too much bulk by tying in this stem all the way up, but you can see that tail is just a little bit sparse. I like it a little bit more. So if you're not using this, if you're using like a different hackle fiber like a rooster or some sort of coq de leon or something like that, you want to, I don't know the exact number, but we're looking at probably 20 to 30 fibers here. It's a pretty aggressive tail, and so that's where we're at. So I typically use the 2 feathers, and I just tie that back in. I'm going to advance my thread back so that I can do those 2 or 3 loose wraps again to see how it lines up with the first feather I tied in, and I'll just kind of adjust that. You can see right now it's a little long, so I'll pull it in just a little bit more, and right there they're about the same length, so I'll go ahead and tie that stem in just like we did before. And notice how I'm stopping it about 2 eye lengths behind the eye. I want to leave a little bit of room for finishing this fly with the hackle we're going to be doing. So I'll advance my thread back, just kind of clean up that body a little bit, and then pinch those with my left hand and kind of advance my thread a little further back. And you can see we've got a little bit of bulk as we transition up that stem, but that's going to be okay because we're going to use some peacock for the body of this. But we're going to tie in some French oval tinsel. This is medium by Semperfli in gold. This is going to be the last material we wrap, and so I tied in first, and I'm going to tie it in all the way up the same style or the same length as our stems from our tail. That way we're just trying to create such a uniform underbody, and as we work our way back, I'm going to kind of transition it over to the side so that our first wrap is going to be coming forward. And then I'm going to use this mylar tinsel. This is silver and gold, and I'm just going to get off a chunk here. It kind of came off the spool, but we're going to, you only need about, shoot, you could probably get by with 1.5 inches. However, I like to tie or cut off about 4 to 5 inches, so I've got plenty of room to palmer this around, and we're going to be using the rotary function of the vise for this tutorial. But if you don't have a rotary vise, you can just palmer it around like you traditionally would, like we're doing with our thread right now. So the last material we're going to tie in, which is going to be the first we're going to wrap, is actually our peacock. And for this, I don't know how I found these, but this black peacock here that I'm going to grab is just unreal. So like I said, this is going to be a unique color scheme, but this is black. It's really cool. It's almost like a bluish hue to it. Very unique. I'm going to pull off about 3 fibers here and I'll go ahead and just cut out the butt ends so that we are starting with a little bit of the fuzzy fibers, and I'll go ahead and tie those in just right there by the butt ends, and we will begin to advance our fly by getting our thread up here right behind the hook eye. And I'm going to do a couple half hitches here just so that we can get ready, and I'll put my bobbin on the bobbin rest, and we are going to move into the body of this fly. So I'm going to go ahead and get my thread here out of the way, and the next step is I'm going to grab these 3 peacock fibers, and I always like to put a little bit of glue down before I twist them, because peacock is not the most durable material, but it's just so fishy. And so by adding that little bit of super glue, we're making this bulletproof, even though I'm counter ribbing it with some wire. And so we're going to work our way around that hook point and then begin to advance our peacock up this body at roughly a slight angle, and we'll just advance it all the way up until we get right behind that hook eye, and then I'll go ahead and tie this off. So you can see how easy that is, how uniform. That's a pretty good wrap job, just doing this, reaching around my SLR, and I'll go ahead and do a wrap behind that peacock, and then I'll do a couple wraps in front of it to trap that in place. And then we know that 1, that super glue is holding this down, making it a little bit stronger, and then 2, we're going to counter rib it, so this body is super durable. Now before you do any spinning with your rotary, make sure you do a half hitch. The last thing you want to do is have those wraps we just did come undone. And now I'm going to go with the tinsel here, and I'm going to kind of do bigger angle wraps. I'm counter ribbing it, although with the angle we're doing, even if you wrapped it the same direction, you'd be totally fine. So that's just user preference, because technically by doing it at a different angle, you're still over or counter ribbing it. But I did it the opposite direction, that I wrapped the peacock just out of habit. Now I'm going to get the bobbin right here close to the hook shank so that I can tie this off, and I'm kind of reaching around. It's being a little bit stubborn with me right now, and we're going to go ahead and tie that off. And as you do that, you want to just kind of fold that tinsel back just a little bit, and then we'll do another half hitch, because we're going to be palmering up this oval tinsel now. And the way we're going to do that is I'm going to have it just ride right on the edge of this tinsel we just tied in between the peacock and the tinsel. And so we'll get that trap. Just be a little bit careful not to trap peacock fibers down at this point. And the way I do that is I kind of step it back into the peacock, but I'm holding pretty good tension on this because I want it to make it a little bit fancy. As you can see, it adds a little bit of difference in somewhat speckled, I guess. I don't know what to call the French tinsel, but it adds a little bit of unique property to it that I think, one, is it dresses it up just a little bit. It's used by a lot of the classic salmon fly tires, and so I'm going to give that a go for this. Like I said, I'm just trying to make this a little bit fancier. However, most of the ones I fish, you don't need to even do these extra steps. I just run some gold wire through it, or silver wire, or some copper wire, depending on what color scheme I'm going for. But I really like how this is turning out, and now I'm going to grab another feather off this this patch here, and we're going to grab one with a little bit more longer fibers, because I'm going to do the same process of prepping it by stripping off the fluff, and then we really need to find the tip of this, because we don't have a lot of hackle fibers here. It's not like we've got like a platinum grade dry fly hackle where you've got 20 flies you can make out of it. We're going to get just enough to create a really good collar on this, and so I'm going to tie that in right there by the tip with a couple wraps, and then I'm going to pull that tip back just to really trap it in place and also create a little bit of a better underbody. That oval tinsel could potentially create a problem for you by a hump, and then I'm going to really kind of press these fibers back. Usually I don't necessarily do that, but in this case, with the limited amount we have, I want to make sure that they're all going back, and then I'm going to spiral wrap this up through that oval tinsel I tied off, and then I'm going to use some touching wraps here to trap these fibers and making sure they all go back, and it's almost the perfect amount. I got a little too close to the head there, so I'm going to back it off a little bit. and we'll try that again, just making sure that we get this so that we got plenty of room for to tie it off and to create a little bit of a head. And so there we go. I like that a little bit better, so I'll go ahead and trap that just right over the top with a couple wraps, and then I'll pull it back and do a few wraps in front of it to trap that really good, nice and secure, and then I'll trim it off. Be careful not to let your thread slide off at this point. If you are not confident enough with your thread staying behind the hook eye, you could have done a half hitch at that point. And then we'll just use our thread here to build up a little bit of a head, backing up over that hackle, the pheasant rump fibers just a little bit, so that they're pushed back into a nice collar there. And I'll go ahead and do a whip finish, and we are done. The thing I like about the nano silk is it doesn't build up a lot of bulk. You saw I had to do about 20 turns to get that head the way it looks. And then we're going to coat this in a thin UV resin just to really glossen it, make it look pretty and durable. This, in my theory, this resin kind of soaks in through the materials at this point, so I usually let it soak in for just a minute, and then we'll go ahead and we will cure that for 10 to 15 seconds. And usually I like to do 2 to 3 coats with this. For this, I think we're going to be fine with just 2, the way it's looking at this point. So that's looking real nice. Just make sure not to get any of that resin into the hook eye, and we'll go ahead and cure that up, rotating the vise around. And that is a fancied up Carey special. Super effective. A different color scheme. I'm going to try it out. Usually I do this in natural peacock with brown, gold, silver, copper wire. So pretty effective. Fish them in sizes 4 to 8, and hopefully they catch some fish for you. Thanks for watching.